I have processed 11,000 timesheets in 9 years at Harwick Valley VA outpatient clinic. I know every nurse's name, every doctor's parking spot, every line item on every supply request that crosses my desk. I thought I knew this place the way a man knows the inside of his own coat pocket. I was wrong about all of it. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was the woman who had been moving quietly through our hallways for 3 years, checking 4 lines, pulling chart flags, staying past her shift without once complaining about it. Her name was Nora Waverly. She wore teal scrubs on Tuesdays, navy on Thursdays, and a plain olive drab lanyard with what looked like a key ring on it. A small flat disc of metal, scuffed enough that I never thought to look closer. I processed her bi-weekly timesheet the same as everyone else's. I never asked her a single question about where she came from. I'm telling you this so you understand what kind of witness I was that afternoon. The kind who sees everything and understands nothing. The lobby dedication was Karen Bellard's idea. She was the regional program director out of the district office, a woman in a charcoal blazer who carried a leather portfolio and smiled at veterans the way a person smiles at a photograph, politely at a distance. She had come to Harwick Valley to dedicate the new East Wing waiting room to a Corporal Denny Firth, killed in Kandahar in 2011. There was a plaque. There were folding chairs. Someone had put out a coffee urn that nobody touched. I stood near the back with my clipboard because that is where administrative coordinators stand. Dr. Osei, our clinic director, was up front with Bellard and the county commissioner and the corporal's parents, a retired couple from Harwick who sat very still in the front row with their hands folded. The waiting room held maybe 60 people, veterans in various states of ambulatory health, a few staff members, 2 local reporters who had come for the photographs. Nora was at the far left of the room, near the window bay, monitoring in 4 line on an older gentleman in a wheelchair. She wasn't part of the ceremony. She was just doing her job in the room where the ceremony happened to be occurring. That was the thing about Nora. She was always simply there, inside whatever needed doing, with no fanfare and no announcement. Bellard spoke for 12 minutes. She talked about sacrifice and gratitude and the VA's commitment to the men and women who served. She was good at it. Then she paused and said she had an announcement, and she turned to Dr. Osei and said that the Veterans Services Coordinator position, a new role, cross-clinic, the one the staff had been talking about for months, had been reviewed, and that the regional office had identified the candidate profile they were looking for, and that the details would be communicated through proper channels. She said it warmly. She said it the way a person says a thing when the decision has already been made and is not reversible. I had submitted Nora Waverly's name for that position 6 weeks earlier. I had written half a page of notes, which was more than I had written for anyone in 9 years. I had watched her work a mass casualty surge in February when we were short 4 nurses and the attending was stuck at county. Watch her manage 9 patients, triage on the fly, make the calls that needed making, not once raise her voice. I put her name on a form and sent it up the chain. Bellard hadn't mentioned Nora's name. Bellard hadn't mentioned anyone's name. But when she stepped away from the microphone and turned to speak quietly to Dr. Osei, I saw Osei nod and glance, briefly, toward the back of the room, and then look away. That was the whole of it. No confrontación, no conversación. Just a look and a nod and the quiet closing of a door. Nora was still at the window bay. She adjusted the flow on the 4 line, checked the gentleman's wrist, said something that made him smile. She hadn't heard any of it, or if she had, she gave no sign. That was when the side door opened. He came in from the parking lot entrance, a tall man, late 60s, civilian clothes, a canvas jacket over a blue-collared shirt, silver hair close-cropped. He moved the way certain men move when they are accustomed to rooms adjusting to them, though he made no noise about it. He stopped just inside the door, scanned the lobby once, and then stood quietly near the coat hooks, listening to the tail end of what Bellard was saying. I didn't know him. I found out his name later. Colonel Harlan Wick, retired, formerly commanding officer of the 340th Special Operations Support Battalion, 2 tours in eastern Afghanistan. He was in Harwick Valley for a private matter, a nephew at the county hospital, and someone on the county commissioner's staff had mentioned the dedication and he had stopped in. He stood near the door for perhaps 3 minutes. The ceremony was wrapping up. People were beginning to shift in their chairs. Then something made him turn his head toward the window bay, toward the far left of the room. I was watching Nora because I was still thinking about Osei's glance. And so I saw it. She had seen him. She was looking across the lobby at him. Not urgently, not with surprise, just a steady look. Then she raised her left hand from the foreline, pressed her left fist once, slowly, against her sternum, held it one beat. Then she opened her palm flat, fingers together, and held it level for 2 seconds before letting her hand drop back to her side. It was the quietest thing I had ever seen a person do. If I'd been looking at the plaque on the wall, or the coffee urn, or anywhere else, I would have missed it entirely. Harlan Wick went still. He had been reaching to unbutton the top button of his jacket, one of those small, unconscious fidgets a person does in a warm room, and his hand simply stopped. He stood without moving for what felt like a long time, though it was probably 3 or 4 seconds. Then he turned his head and looked at Nora Waverly the way a man looks at something he has searched for and stopped believing he would find. He crossed the lobby. He didn't hurry. He moved through the folding chairs and the shifting crowd with the same quiet deliberateness he'd entered with, and people stepped out of his way without being asked, the way people do when a certain kind of man moves with a certain kind of purpose. Bellard was still talking to Osei near the podium. The county commissioner was shaking the corporal's father's hand. Nobody was watching the far side of the room except me. He stopped in front of Nora. He was a head taller than she was. She looked up at him with an expression I can only describe as calm. Not surprised, not performative, just calm. He looked at the lanyard, the olive drab cord, the small scuffed disc of metal on the ring. He reached out, not touching it, just looking the way a man looks at a thing he recognizes from very far away. 340th support, he said. His voice was low. I was close enough to hear it because I had drifted without entirely deciding to within about 15 feet of them. Sir, Norris said, you made the Overwatch signal. You were in the room, she said. I didn't want to interrupt this ceremony. He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. You've been here how long? 3 years, sir. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, quietly enough that I almost didn't catch it. Kynner, the aid station. 14 hours. 12 and a half, she said. The surgeon was medevaced at 0340. 10 men. 10 men. I did not understand what I was hearing. I understood the words individually. I did not understand what they added up to. Then, from behind me, I heard chairs scrape. I turned. One of the veterans in the waiting chairs, a man in his late 30s, ball cap, one arm and a compression sleeve, who had been sitting with a paper cup of coffee on his knee for the past 40 minutes, had stood up. He was on his feet. He was looking at Nora. He took his coffee cup off his knee and set it on the floor with the precision of a man making room in his hands, and he came to attention. Not loosely, not the way a civilian straightens up when startled. He came to attention the way men do when they mean it, heels together, eyes front, chin level. His right hand came up in a salute, and he held it. I heard a second chair. On the other side of the room, near the rack of brochures for the sleep clinic, where I would not have noticed him in 100 years, another man rose. Younger, maybe 30, a sling on his left shoulder. He came to attention beside the brochure rack. His salute was not perfect, but it was absolutely sincere. The third man was already standing. He had been leaning against the wall by the water fountain, arms crossed, the way men lean when their back aches and they'd rather stand than sit. He uncrossed his arms and came to attention and rendered his salute the same as the others. 3 men, a ball cap, a sling, and a back that hurt, standing at attention in a VA clinic lobby during a dedication ceremony for a corporal they may or may not have known, standing for Nora Waverly. Bellard had stopped talking. I looked at her. She was still watching the 3 men, and her expression had changed. Not broken, not undone, but something had moved in it, the way still water moves when something passes through from underneath. She gave one small nod, precise and slow, and the 3 men held their salutes a beat longer, then came down. Harlan Wick had not saluted. He had simply stood beside her, and that was its own thing entirely. Bellard was 10 feet away. I know this because I can still see the exact patch of lobby floor between where she was standing and where Nora was standing 10 feet of polished tile that might as well have been 10 miles. Bellard had her portfolio open and her hand had stopped moving above whatever she had been writing. She was looking at the three men. Then she looked at Nora. Then she looked at Wick. She didn't say anything. I don't know what she could have said. I moved closer to Wick afterward, when the room had begun its slow dissolve. People drifting toward the door, the county commissioner helping the corporal's father into his coat, someone quietly stacking the folding chairs. Nora had gone back to her patient. She had simply turned and walked back to the gentleman in the wheelchair and checked his line again, unhurried, as if the lobby were the same room it had been 30 minutes ago. "Can I ask you something?" I said to Wick. He looked at me, not unkindly. I told him I was the administrative coordinator, that I had worked with her for 3 years. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "Do you know why the position was called Overwatch?" I told him I didn't. "In my battalion," he said, "the medical element had a field designation for the senior trauma nurse who held the aid station alone during a mass casualty event. We only ever used it for one person at a time. It meant the person who stayed when everyone else was gone." He paused. Kinner Province. August 4 years ago. A forward aid station took a vehicle strike. The battalion surgeon was the second casualty. Waverly ran triage for 12 and a half hours without a physician, without air support, without resupply. 10 soldiers went in critical or near critical. 10 came out alive. He said it the way a person states a fact that still astonishes them. We looked for her afterward to put her in for the medal. She'd already ETS'd, took a position here. He looked across the lobby toward her. I didn't know where she went. I thought about the timesheet. The bi-weekly timesheet I had processed 156 times. Name, hours, pay grade. I had never read a single line of it that told me any of this. She never said a word. I said. "No," Wick said. She wouldn't. I looked at the three men. The one with the ball cap was pulling on his jacket near the door. The one with the sling was signing out at the front desk. The one whose back hurt was already gone, out through the side exit, back to whatever part of his life he had been living before this afternoon. I looked at Karen Bellard. She was at the podium collecting her materials, the portfolio, the printed remarks, the press kit the county commissioner's office had prepared. She had not looked at Nora again. I wondered if she would go back to the district office and adjust the coordinator position's candidate profile, or whether she would simply not mention the afternoon to anyone. And I thought the second thing was more likely, and I thought that was probably the right call, because there are some things a suit and a leather portfolio cannot address. The gentleman in the wheelchair was laughing at something Nora had said. She was leaning down slightly to hear him, her stethoscope hanging loose, the olive drab lanyard with its small scuffed ring catching the afternoon light from the window. I went back to my desk. I pulled Nora Waverly's timesheet from the stack, and I looked at it for a long time. Same form I had processed 156 times. Name, hours, pay grade. A line on a spreadsheet. I have never thought about a timesheet the same way since.